Part 2, my debate with Pyro. Here we go.
A chance to live, that doesn't count because they're non-existent. But this fact that you spared them from pain also wouldn't count in that case, and you're trying to make that count.
I'm not trying to make it count, it just counts. Okay, you've got universe A and you've got universe B. Okay, in universe A there is someone who is suffering, who regrets that they were born and, you know, wish they hadn't been born. And in universe B you've got the same universe, except the fact that that person doesn't exist. Now, is it possible to make an objective decision as to which universe is preferable in its state of affairs? Yes, it is. It's universe B, because there's one less person who's suffering harm and suffering, and that's a bad thing. And, you know, if there's some abstraction going on there, you know, it's logically valid, sound, rational abstraction.
Specifically said that counts. And you're using hypothetical anecdotes, you know, with heroin addicted parents and being subjugated into slavery that you admit are super unlikely.
No, I admitted that, you know, facing a predicament where you're about to be tortured, like in a scene out of Hostel, is unlikely. I mean, it depends how you define likely and unlikely. The scenario of, you know, heroin addicted, AIDS infested, you know, Indian mothers having a son who's forced into slavery and has his fingers cut off. It's unlikely, but there must be hundreds, thousands of children in that kind of in a situation analogous to that, and that's an awful amount of pain and suffering. I mean, if you personally are experiencing pain and suffering, it consumes your universe. You know, it's your own sentient experience, and it just overwhelms your sense of self to the extent that your self is kind of fragmented. I mean, it's a huge deal, you know. So just one person just thinking about that horror is really enough to put you off your food, and that just increases exponentially, so almost. If you think of all the people who are having terrible, awful lives, and even if it's unlikely, there are what, 6.5 billion people in the world, so there are many people who we need to take into consideration what we've done to them by playing this survival and reproduction game.
So the weight of that argument is in proportion to its likelihood, okay, as far as I can see.
In a sense, yes. I mean, you could argue that if there was a hell of a lot more pain and suffering in the world than there currently is, then the anti-natalist position would be stronger. But my argument is, we still live in a damn horrible, unpredictable and potentially terrible, extremely gratuitously pain-inflicting world, and it's still bad, and it still warrants a worldwide state of non-antinatalism to me, if we are going to be rational and objective about these things, which obviously it seems that the human race isn't able to do, at least not at the start of the 21st century.
The issue with the positive aspects of life is not so much that they're there, but their transformative nature. That you can actually, like in some more mild cases as a child, you know, I didn't like certain chores that I grew up, I appreciated.
I just can't believe this. We're talking about the morality of procreation and the potential absolutely harmful things that people can experience, and you're talking about these little childhood chores. I mean, you know, it's preposterous.
Later, literally that actual event. I didn't just learn how to avoid it. Or, you know, medical experiences. I didn't learn how to avoid them, but it did make me stronger about what I think of life. And
yeah, but if you're not born, then you don't need to become stronger. You know, you don't need to deal with these problems, so there's no need to be stronger.
approach life. And
you're injecting people with a need to be stronger when there's no need for them to be stronger.
I survived it, and I felt stronger because I was able to survive it. So it's more about not that they're positive, but it's the fact that I have a very different way of doing the mathematics. I believe our experience.
Yeah, you have a different way of doing the mathematics, but I've got a way of doing the mathematics, and it's completely at odds with the way that you do mathematics.
They're transformative. We can experience them as suffering at one point, and then pain again later, and then we can experience them as a positive thing still later. We can go back.
Yeah, but it's not completely flexible. You know, it has constraints. I mean, you know, if you suffer from chronic depression, you know, there aren't a great deal of negative, positive spins you can put on that. It doesn't matter how you look at it. You know, being chronically depressed all the time is an extremely unpleasant thing. You know, and that's probably an understatement.
You can switch around. You can go the other way. You can have a pleasurable experience that later on is painful to think about. The fact that you had pleasure in it at the time could be painful to think about. So it's more about the fact that this proves that the pleasure and pain are interpretations we put on material events.
To a certain extent. But again, you know, there are constraints. We can't force ourselves to regard inherently harmful, unpleasant experiences as a neutral or a pleasant thing.
You can't really blame existence, the materiality, the fact that you have materiality for that aspect, because it's interpretive. It's how the mind, you know, and it gets back to our biology.
But it's the material fact of our own existence that creates this brain that can experience pain and harm and suffering. So of course I attribute our ability to potentially feel incredible suffering as a product of the material brain, you know, manifesting itself in consciousness.
We have systems that when you get cut on your finger, you know, you don't have to have a system that interprets that as a feeling of pain that you feel. You know, your body does that because it's a terrible malady. When children, for example, are born without the ability to feel pain, they get burns and cuts, they don't cry, parents don't know, they themselves don't know, they don't learn the habits of ordinary safety. So we have these things because they're helping us out. Because
they're helping us out in as much as they're kind of instrumental. They have an instrumental function that is, you know, to prevent further trauma to our bodies. But they're not intrinsically good, and there's certainly not reasons to bring people into existence, and there's certainly not reasons to negate the fact that pain, physical pain, you know, is an unpleasant thing, and all things being equal, it's better that they don't exist, and the people who can experience them don't exist.
It's possible to interpret pain as a positive thing, in the fact that, oh, you pull your hand out of the fire, that's positive.
But if you don't exist, there are no fires to pull your fingers out of, so you don't need this kind of instrumental function of pain. And personally, I think pain is, I think Mother Nature could have done a better job with that, really. I mean, if you got your finger in a flame, for example, maybe you could get some tinnitus, you know, some ringing in your ears, and you'd know to pull your finger away, you know. So it seems a very crude way to ensure that an organism, you know, reacts in a constructive way when they face the physical stimulus of pain.
Similarity between the
or danger,
suffering and pleasure, you know, should give you a clue of why you can't say that we can't deprive the unborn, but we can spare them.
Yeah, well, I've already explained this to you. A universe in which there is less suffering is objectively a better place in which there is more suffering. And I think that will conclude it nicely.